Section 14 of the Interpretation of Dreams. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Recording by J. Anderson. The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. Translated by A. A. Brill. Section 14. Distortion in Dreams. Analysis. The patient's husband, an honest and capable meat salesman, had told her the day before that he was growing too fat and that he meant to undergo treatment for obesity. He would rise early, take physical exercise, keep to a strict diet, and above all, accept no more invitations to supper. She proceeds jestingly to relate how her husband, at a table d'hôte, had made the acquaintance of an artist who insisted upon painting his portrait, because he, the painter, had never seen such an expressive head. But her husband had answered in his downright fashion that while he was much obliged, he would rather not be painted, and he was quite convinced that a bit of a pretty girl's posterior would please the artist better than his whole face. She is very much in love with her husband and teases him a good deal. She has asked him not to give her any more caviar. What can that mean? Goethe. And if he has no backside, how can the nobleman sit? As a matter of fact, she had wanted for a long time to eat a caviar sandwich every morning, but had grudged the expense. Of course she could get the caviar from her husband at once if she asked for it, but she has, on the contrary, begged him not to give her any caviar so that she might tease him about it a little longer. To me, this explanation seems thin. Unconfessed motives are wont to conceal themselves behind just such unsatisfying explanations. We are reminded of the subjects hypnotized by Bernheim, who carried out post-hypnotic order, and who, on being questioned as to their motives, instead of answering, "I do not know why I did that," had to invent a reason that was obviously inadequate. There is probably something similar to this in the case of my patient's caviar. I see that in waking life she is compelled to invent an unfulfilled wish. Her dream also shows her the non-fulfillment of her wish. But why does she need an unfulfilled wish? The ideas elicited so far are insufficient for the interpretation of the dream. I press for more. After a short pause, which corresponds to the overcoming of a resistance, she reports that the day before she had paid a visit to a friend of whom she is really jealous, because her husband is always praising this lady so highly. Fortunately, this friend is very thin and lanky, and her husband likes full figures. Now of what did this thin friend speak? Of course, of her wish to become rather plumper. She also asked my patient, "When are you going to invite us again? You always have such good food." Now the meaning of the dream is clear. I am able to tell the patient, it is just as though you had thought at the moment of her asking you that, of course, I'm to invite you so that you can eat at my house and get fat and become still more pleasing to my husband. I would rather give no more suppers. The dream then tells you that you cannot give a supper, thereby fulfilling your wish not to contribute anything to the rounding out of your friend's figure. Your husband's resolution to accept no more invitations to supper in order that he may grow thin teaches you that one grows fat on food eaten at other people's tables. Nothing is lacking now but some sort of coincidence which will confirm the solution. The smoked salmon in the dream has not yet been traced. How did you come to think of salmon in your dream? Smoked salmon is my friend's favorite dish, she replied. It happens that I know the lady, and am able to affirm that she grudges herself salmon, just as my patient grudges herself caviar. This dream admits of yet another and more exact interpretation, one which is actually necessitated only by a subsidiary circumstance. The two interpretations do not contradict one another, but rather dovetail into one another, and furnish an excellent example of the usual ambiguity of dreams, as of all other psychopathological formations. We have heard that at the time of her dream, of a denied wish, the patient was impelled to deny herself a real wish, the wish to eat caviar sandwiches. Her friend, too, had expressed a wish, namely, to get fatter, and it would not surprise us if our patient had dreamt that this wish of her friend's, the wish to increase in weight, was not to be fulfilled. Instead of this, however, she dreamt that one of her own wishes was not fulfilled. The dream becomes capable of a new interpretation, if in the dream she does not mean herself, but her friend. if she has put herself in the place of her friend, or, as we may say, has identified herself with her friend. I think she has actually done this, and as a sign of this identification, she has created for herself in real life an unfulfilled wish. But what is the meaning of this hysterical identification? To elucidate this, a more exhaustive exposition is necessary. Identification is a highly important motive in the mechanism of hysterical symptoms. By this means, patients are enabled to express in their symptoms not merely their own experiences, but the experiences of quite a number of other persons. They can suffer, as it were, for a whole mass of people, and fill all the parts of a drama with their own personalities. It will here be objected that this is the well-known hysterical imitation, the ability of hysterical subjects to imitate all the symptoms which impress them when they occur in others, as though pity were aroused to the point of reproduction. This, however, only indicates the path which the psychic process follows in hysterical imitation. But the path itself and the psychic act which follows this path are two different matters. The act itself is slightly more complicated than we are prone to believe the imitation of the hysterical to be. It corresponds to an unconscious end process, as an example will show. The physician who has, in the same ward with other patients, a female patient suffering from a particular kind of twitching, is not surprised if one morning he learns that this peculiar hysterical affection has found imitators. He merely tells himself, the others have seen her and have imitated her. This is psychic infection. Yes, but psychic infection occurs somewhat in the following manner. As a rule, patients know more about one another than the physician knows about any one of them, and they are concerned about one another when the doctor's visit is over. One of them has an attack today. At once it is known to the rest that a letter from home, a recrudescence of lovesickness, or the like, is the cause. Their sympathy is aroused, and although it does not emerge into consciousness, they form the following conclusion. If it is possible to suffer such an attack from such a cause, I too may suffer this sort of an attack, for I have the same occasion for it. If this were a conclusion capable of becoming conscious, it would perhaps express itself in dread of suffering a like attack, but it is formed in another psychic region, and consequently ends in the realization of the dreaded symptoms. Thus, identification is not mere imitation, but an assimilation based upon the same etological claim. It expresses a just like, and refers to some common condition which has remained in the unconscious. In hysteria, identification is most frequently employed to express a sexual community. The hysterical woman identifies herself by her symptoms most readily, though not exclusively, with persons with whom she has had sexual relations, or who have had sexual intercourse with the same persons as herself. Language takes cognizance of this tendency. Two lovers are said to be one. In hysterical fantasy, as well as in dreams, identification may ensue if one simply thinks of sexual relations. They need not necessarily become actual. The patient is merely following the rules of the hysterical processes of thought when she expresses her jealousy of her friend, which, for that matter, she herself admits to be unjustified. By putting herself in her friend's place in her dream and identifying herself with her by fabricating a symptom, the denied wish. One might further elucidate the process by saying, in the dream she puts herself in the place of her friend, because her friend has taken her own place in relation to her husband, and because she would like to take her friend's place in her husband's esteem. I myself regret the inclusion of such passages from the psychopathology of hysteria, which, because of their fragmentary presentation, and because they are torn out of their context, cannot prove to be very illuminating. If these passages are capable of throwing any light upon the intimate relations between dream and psychoneurosis, they have served the intention with which I have included them. The contradiction of my theory of dreams on the part of another female patient, the most intelligent of all my dreamers, was solved in a simpler fashion, though still in accordance with the principle that the non-fulfillment of one wish signified the fulfillment of another. I had one day explained to her that a dream is a wish fulfillment. On the following day, she related a dream to the effect that she was traveling with her mother-in-law to the place in which they were both to spend the summer. Now I knew that she had violently protested against spending the summer in the neighborhood of her mother-in-law. I also knew that she had fortunately been able to avoid doing so, since she had recently succeeded in renting a house in a place quite remote from that to which her mother-in-law was going. And now the dream reversed this desired solution. Was not this a flat contradiction of my theory of wish fulfillment? One had only to draw the inferences from this dream in order to arrive at its interpretation. According to this dream, I was wrong, but it was her wish that I should be wrong, and this wish the dream showed her as fulfilled. But the wish that I should be wrong, which was fulfilled in the theme of the country house, referred in reality to another and more serious matter. At that time I had inferred, from the material furnished by her analysis, that something of significance in respect to her illness must have occurred at a certain time in her life. She had denied this because it was not present in her memory. We soon came to see that I was right. Thus her wish that I should prove to be wrong, which was transformed into the dream that she was going into the country with her mother-in-law, corresponded with the justifiable wish that those things, which were then only suspected, had never occurred. Without an analysis, and merely by means of an assumption, I took the liberty of interpreting a little incident in the life of a friend who had been my companion through 8 classes at school. He once heard a lecture of mine, delivered to a small audience, on the novel idea that dreams are wish fulfillments. He went home, dreamt that he had lost all his lawsuits, he was a lawyer, and then complained to me about it. I took refuge in the evasion. One can't win all one's cases, but I thought to myself, if, for 8 years, I sat as primus on the first bench, while he moved up and down somewhere in the middle of the class, may he not naturally have had the wish, ever since his boyhood, that I too might for once make a fool of myself? Yet another dream of a more gloomy character was offered me by a female patient in contradiction of my theory of the wish dream. This patient, a young girl, began as follows. You remember that my sister has now only one boy, Charles. She lost the elder one, Otto, while I was still living with her. Otto was my favorite. It was I who really brought him up. Like the other little fellow, too, but of course, not nearly as much as his dead brother. Now I dreamt last night that I saw Charles lying dead before me. He was lying in his little coffin, his hands folded. There were candles all about. And, in short, it was just as it was at the time of little Otto's death, which gave me such a shock. Now tell me, what does this mean? You know me. Am I really so bad as to wish that my sister should lose the only child she has left? Or does the dream mean that I wish that Charles had died rather than Otto, whom I liked so much better? I assured her that this latter interpretation was impossible. After some reflection, I was able to give her the interpretation of the dream, which she subsequently confirmed. I was able to do so because the whole previous history of the dreamer was known to me. Having become an orphan at an early age, the girl had been brought up in the home of a much older sister, and had met, among the friends and visitors who frequented the house, a man who made a lasting impression upon her affections. It looked for a time as though these barely explicit relations would end in marriage, but this happy culmination was frustrated by the sister, whose motives were never completely explained. After the rupture, the man whom my patient loved avoided the house. She herself attained her independence some time after the death of little Otto, to whom, meanwhile, her affections had turned. But she did not succeed in freeing herself from the dependence due to her affection for her sister's friend. Her pride bade her avoid him, but she found it impossible to transfer her love to the other suitors who successively presented themselves. Whenever the man she loved, who was a member of the literary profession, announced a lecture anywhere, she was certain to be found among the audience, and she seized every other opportunity of seeing him unobserved. I remembered that on the previous day she had told me that the professor was going to a certain concert, and that she too was going, in order to enjoy the sight of him. This was on the day before the dream, and the concert was to be given on the day on which she told me the dream. I could now easily see the correct interpretation, and I asked her whether she could think of any particular event which had occurred after Otto's death. She replied immediately, "Of course. The professor returned then after a long absence, and I saw him once more beside little Otto's coffin. It was just as I had expected. I interpreted the dream as follows. If now the other boy were to die, the same thing would happen again. You would spend the day with your sister, the professor would certainly come to offer his condolences, and you would see him once more under the same circumstances as before. The dream signifies nothing more than this wish of yours to see him again, a wish against which you are fighting inwardly. I know that you have the ticket for today's concert in your bag. Your dream is a dream of impatience. It has anticipated by several hours the meeting which is to take place today. In order to disguise her wish, she had obviously selected a situation in which wishes of the sort are commonly suppressed, a situation so sorrowful that love is not even thought of. And yet it is entirely possible that even in the actual situation beside the coffin of the elder, more dearly loved boy, she had not been able to suppress her tender affection for the visitor whom she had missed for so long. A different explanation was found in the case of a similar dream of another patient, who in earlier life had been distinguished for her quick wit and her cheerful disposition, and who still displayed these qualities, at all events in the free associations which occurred to her during treatment. In the course of a longer dream, it seemed to this lady that she saw her 15-year-old daughter lying dead before her in a box. She was strongly inclined to use this dream image as an objection to the theory of wish fulfillment, although she herself suspected that the detail of the box must lead to a different conception of the dream. For in the course of the analysis, it occurred to her that on the previous evening, the conversation of the people in whose company she found herself had turned on the English word box, and upon the numerous translations of it into German, such as Schachtel, Loge, Kasten, Orfiege, etc. From other components of the same dream, it was now possible to add the fact that the lady had guessed at the relationship between the English word box and the German Buchse, and had then been haunted by the recollection that Buchse is used in vulgar parlance to denote the female genitals. It was therefore possible, treating her knowledge of topographical anatomy with a certain indulgence, to assume that the child in the box signified a child in the mother's womb. At this stage of the explanation, she no longer denied that the picture in the dream actually corresponded with a wish of hers. Like so many other young women, she was by no means happy on finding that she was pregnant, and she had confessed to me more than once the wish that her child might die before its birth. In a fit of anger, following a violent scene with her husband, she had even struck her abdomen with her fists in order to injure the child within. The dead child was therefore really the fulfillment of a wish, but a wish which had been put aside for 15 years, and it is not surprising that the fulfillment of the wish was no longer recognized after so long an interval, for there had been many changes in the meantime. The group of dreams, having as content the death of beloved relatives, to which belong the last two mentioned, will be considered again under the head of typical dreams. I shall then be able to show, by new examples, that in spite of their undesirable content, all these dreams must be interpreted as wish fulfillments. For the following dream, which again was told to me in order to deter me from a hasty generalization of my theory, I am indebted, not to a patient, but to an intelligent jurist of my acquaintance. I dream, my informant tells me, that I am walking in front of my house with a lady on my arm. Here, a closed carriage is waiting. A man steps up to me, shows me his authorization as a police officer, and requests me to follow him. I ask only for time in which to arrange my affairs. The jurist then asks me, "Can you possibly suppose that it is my wish to be arrested?" Of course not, I have to admit. Do you happen to know upon what charge you were arrested? Yes, I believe for infanticide. Infanticide? But you know that only a mother can commit this crime upon her newborn child. That is true. And under what circumstances did you dream this? What happened on the evening before? I would rather not tell you. It is a delicate matter. But I need it. Otherwise we must forego the interpretation of the dream. Well then, I will tell you. I spent the night, not at home, but in the house of a lady who means a great deal to me. When we awoke in the morning, something again passed between us. Then I went to sleep again and dreamt what I have told you. The woman is married? Yes. And you do not wish her to conceive? No, that might betray us. Then you do not practice normal coitus? I take the precaution to withdraw before ejaculation. Am I to assume that you took this precaution several times during the night, and that in the morning you were not quite sure whether you had succeeded? That might be so. Then your dream is the fulfillment of a wish. By the dream you are assured that you have not begotten a child, or, what amounts to the same thing, that you have killed the child. I can easily demonstrate the connecting links. Do you remember, a few days ago we were talking about the troubles of matrimony, and about the inconsistency of permitting coitus so long as no impregnation takes place, while at the same time any preventive act committed after the ovum and the semen meet and a fetus is formed is punished as a crime? In this connection we recalled the medieval controversy about the moment of time at which the soul actually enters into the fetus, since the concept of murder becomes admissible only from that point onwards. Of course, too, you know the gruesome poem by Lanau, which puts infanticide and birth control on the same plane. Strangely enough, I happened, as though by chance, to think of Lanau this morning. Another echo of your dream, and I shall now show you yet another incidental wish fulfillment in your dream. You walk up to your house with the lady on your arm, so you take her home, instead of spending the night at her house, as you did in reality. The fact that the wish fulfillment, which is the essence of the dream, disguises itself in such an unpleasant form, has perhaps more than one explanation. From my essay on the etiology of anxiety neurosis, you will see that I note coitus interruptus as one of the factors responsible for the development of neurotic fear. It would be consistent with this if, after repeated coitus of this kind, you were left in an uncomfortable frame of mind, which now becomes an element of the composition of your dream. You even make use of this uncomfortable state of mind to conceal the wish fulfillment. At the same time, the mention of infanticide has not yet been explained. Why does this crime, which is peculiar to females, occur to you? I will confess to you that I was involved in such an affair years ago. I was responsible for the fact that a girl tried to protect herself from the consequences of a liaison with me by procuring an abortion. I had nothing to do with the carrying out of her plan, but for a long time I was naturally worried in case the affair might be discovered. I understand. This recollection furnished a second reason why the supposition that you had performed coitus interruptus clumsily might have been painful to you. It often happens that a dream is told incompletely, and that a recollection of the omitted portions appears only in the course of the analysis. These portions, when subsequently fitted in, invariably furnish the key to the interpretation. Cf. Chapter 7, On Forgetting of Dreams. A young physician who heard this dream related in my lecture room must have felt that it fitted him, for he hastened to imitate it by a dream of his own, applying its mode of thinking to another theme. On the previous day he had furnished a statement of his income, a quite straightforward statement, because he had little to state. He dreamt that an acquaintance of his came from a meeting of the tax commission and informed him that all the other statements had passed unquestioned, but that his own had aroused a general suspicion, with the result that he would be punished with a heavy fine. This dream is a poorly disguised fulfillment of the wish to be known as a physician with a large income. It also calls to mind the story of the young girl who was advised against accepting her suitor because he was a man of quick temper, who would assuredly beat her after their marriage. Her answer was, "I wish he would strike me." Her wish to be married was so intense that she had taken into consideration the discomforts predicted for this marriage. She had even raised them to the plane of a wish. If I group together the very frequent dreams of this sort, which seem flatly to contradict my theory, in that they embody the denial of a wish, or some occurrence obviously undesired, under the head of counter-wish dreams, I find that they may all be referred to two principles, one of which has not yet been mentioned, though it plays a large part in waking as well as dream life. One of the motives inspiring these dreams is the wish that I should appear in the wrong. These dreams occur regularly in the course of treatment whenever the patient is in a state of resistance. Indeed, I can with a great degree of certainty count on evoking such a dream once I have explained to the patient my theory that the dream is a wish fulfillment. Indeed, I have reason to expect that many of my readers will have such dreams, merely to fulfill the wish that I may prove to be wrong. The last dream which I shall recount, from among those occurring in the course of treatment once more, demonstrates this very thing. A young girl who had struggled hard to continue my treatment, against the will of her relatives and the authorities whom they had consulted, dreamt the following dream. At home she is forbidden to come to me any more. She then reminds me of the promise I made her to treat her for nothing if necessary, and I tell her, I can show no consideration in money matters. It is not at all easy in this case to demonstrate the fulfillment of a wish, but in all cases of this kind there is a second problem, the solution of which helps also to solve the first. Where does she get the words which she puts into my mouth? Of course, I have never told her anything of the kind, but one of her brothers, the one who has the greatest influence over her, has been kind enough to make this remark about me. It is then the purpose of the dream to show that her brother is right, and she does not try to justify this brother merely in the dream. It is her purpose in life and the motive of her illness. A dream, which at first sight presents peculiar difficulties for the theory of wish fulfillment, was dreamed by a physician and interpreted by him. I have and see on the last phalange of my left forefinger a primary syphilitic infection. One may perhaps be inclined to refrain from analyzing this dream, since it seems clear and coherent, except for its unwished-for content. However, if one takes the trouble to make an analysis, one learns that primary affection reduces itself to prima affectio, first love, and that the repulsive sore, in the words of Starkey, proves to be the representative of wish fulfillments charged with intense emotion. The other motive for counter-wish dreams is so clear that there is a danger of overlooking it, as happened in my own case for such a long time. In the sexual constitution of many persons, there is a masochistic component, which has arisen through the conversion of the aggressive, sadistic component into its opposite. Such people are called ideal masochists if they seek pleasure not in the bodily pain which may be inflicted upon them, but in humiliation and psychic chastisement. It is obvious that such persons may have counter-wish dreams and disagreeable dreams, yet these are for them nothing more than wish fulfillments, which satisfy their masochistic inclinations. Here is such a dream. A young man, who in earlier youth greatly tormented his elder brother, toward whom he was homosexually inclined, but who has since undergone a complete change of character, has the following dream, which consists of 3 parts. 1. He is teased by his brother. 2. 2 adults are caressing each other with homosexual intentions. 3. His brother has sold the business, the management of which the young man had reserved for his own future. From this last dream he awakens with the most unpleasant feelings, and yet it is a masochistic wish dream, which might be translated. It would serve me right if my brother were to make that sale against my interests. It would be punishment for all the torments he has suffered at my hands. I hope that the examples given above will suffice, until some further objection appears, to make it seem credible that even dreams with painful content are to be analyzed as wish fulfillments. Nor should it be considered a mere matter of chance that, in the course of interpretation, one always happens upon subjects about which one does not like to speak or think. The disagreeable sensation which such dreams arouse is of course precisely identical with the antipathy which would, and usually does, restrain us from treating or discussing such subjects, an antipathy which must be overcome by all of us if we find ourselves obliged to attack the problem of such dreams. But this disagreeable feeling which recurs in our dreams does not preclude the existence of a wish. Everyone has wishes which he would not like to confess to others, which he does not care to admit even to himself. On the other hand, we feel justified in connecting the unpleasant character of all these dreams with the fact of a dream distortion, and in concluding that these dreams are distorted, and that their wish fulfillment is disguised beyond recognition, precisely because there is a strong revulsion against a will to repress the subject matter of the dream, or the wish created by it. Dream distortion, then, proves in reality to be an act of censorship. We shall have included everything which the analysis of disagreeable dreams has brought to light if we reword our formula thus: the dream is the disguised fulfillment of a suppressed, repressed wish. I will here anticipate by citing the amplification and modification of this fundamental formula propounded by Otto Rank. On the basis of, and with the aid of, repressed infantile sexual material, dreams regularly represent as fulfilled current, and as a rule also erotic, wishes in a disguised and symbolic form. Nowhere have I said that I have accepted this formula of Rank's. The shorter version contained in the text seems to me sufficient. But the fact that I merely mentioned Rank's modification was enough to expose psychoanalysis to the oft-repeated reproach that it asserts that all dreams have sexual content. If one understands this sentence as it is intended to be understood, it only proves how little conscientiousness our critics are wont to display, and how ready our opponents are to overlook statements if they do not accord with their aggressive inclinations. Only a few pages back, I mentioned the manifold wish fulfillments of children's dreams, to make an excursion on land and or water, to make up for an omitted meal, etc. Elsewhere, I have mentioned dreams excited by thirst and the desire to evacuate, and mere comfort or convenience dreams. Even Rank does not make an absolute assertion. He says, as a rule, also erotic wishes, and this can be completely confirmed in the case of most dreams of adults. The matter has, however, a different aspect if we employ the word sexual in the sense of eros, as the word is understood by psychoanalysts. But the interesting problem of whether all dreams are not produced by libidinal motives, in opposition to destructive ones, has hardly been considered by our opponents. Now there still remain to be considered, as a particular suborder of dreams with painful content, the anxiety dreams, the inclusion of which among the wish dreams will still be less acceptable to the uninitiated. But I can here deal very cursorily with the problem of anxiety dreams. What they have to reveal is not a new aspect of the dream problem. Here, the problem is that of understanding neurotic anxiety in general. The anxiety which we experience in dreams is only apparently explained by the dream content. If we subject that content to analysis, we become aware that the dream anxiety is no more justified by the dream content than the anxiety in a phobia is justified by the idea to which the phobia is attached. For example, it is true that it is possible to fall out of a window, and that a certain care must be exercised when one is at a window, but it is not obvious why the anxiety in the corresponding phobia is so great, and why it torments its victims more than its cause would warrant. The same explanation which applies to the phobia applies to the anxiety dream. In either case, the anxiety is only fastened onto the idea which accompanies it, and is derived from another source. On account of this intimate relation of dream anxiety to neurotic anxiety, the discussion of the former obliges me to refer to the latter. In a little essay on anxiety neurosis, written in 1895, I maintain that neurotic anxiety has its origin in the sexual life, and corresponds to a libido which has been deflected from its object and has found no employment. The accuracy of this formula has since then been demonstrated with ever-increasing certainty. From it, we may deduce the doctrine that anxiety dreams are dreams of sexual content, and that the libido appertaining to this content has been transformed into anxiety. Later on, I shall have an opportunity of confirming this assertion by the analysis of several dreams of neurotics. In my further attempts to arrive at a theory of dreams, I shall again have occasion to revert to the conditions of anxiety dreams and their compatibility with the theory of wish fulfillment. End of section 14.